In 2 AH, the Quraysh set out to capture a Muslim caravan, unaware of the battle awaiting them at Badr. 300 Muslims stood on the sands of Badr, with only 2 horses and 70 camels between them. Abu Sufyan left camel droppings to mislead Muslim scouts and hide the caravan's path.
Abu Jahl, full of pride, marched toward Badr with over 1,000 men, ignoring the caravan's escape.
The night before battle, the Prophet and Fazl prayed while the believers rested under the stars. As dawn broke, the Muslims gathered, their hearts firm, trusting Allah over numbers or weapons.
The Quraysh, confident in their 1,000 strong, laughed and sang, mocking the believers.
The Muslims prayed quietly, seeking courage, while the desert held its breath before the storm.
Abu Jahl scouted ahead, eager for glory, unaware that his arrogance would seal his fate.
The desert winds shifted and rain clouds gathered, a sign that Allah's plan was unfolding.
The Muslims positioned themselves near Badr's wells, knowing water could decide the battle.
The Quraysh arrived, their armor shining, ready to crush the believers with sheer numbers. The first clash began with arrows, as courage met arrogance on the sands of Badr.
2 young Ansari boys charged forward, fearless, changing the fate of the battlefield.
Abu Jahl's arrogance blinded him as he failed to see the believers' unity and courage.
The rain intensified, softening the sand for Muslims but slowing the Quraysh, turning the desert into a trap. Muslims fought bravely, striking with precision, showing that faith outweighed numbers. Abu Jahl fell to 2 young boys and a shepherd, a shocking turn of fate for the mighty tyrant. The Prophet Muhammad prayed in gratitude, tears in his eyes, as Allah's victory became clear. Bodies of the Quraysh lay on the sand, a stark reminder of pride defeated by faith. The Muslims collected the wounded and tended to their own, showing mercy even in victory. Captives were treated with respect, reflecting the teachings of Islam and the Prophet's unending wisdom. Word of Badr's victory spread across Arabia, shaking the pride of the mighty Quraysh. A small band of believers had triumphed, a miracle proving that faith conquers all. Muslims gathered near the wells, sharing water and tending to camels after the fierce battle. The battlefield was silent, save for the whispers of the wind across sand and fallen armor. Muslims raised their voices in gratitude, remembering that victory belongs only to Allah. News of the triumph reached Madinah, bringing joy and renewed hope to the believers. The day of Badr became a turning point, remembered as Yawm al-Furqan, the day of criterion. The Muslims collected the Quraysh's weapons, a reminder of the day faith overcame might.
Families in Medina prayed and wept in gratitude as news of Badr reached them.
The Quraysh mourned their fallen leaders, realizing pride and arrogance had led to defeat. Muslims sang quiet praises, honoring Allah's guidance and the Prophet's leadership. The victory at Badr inspired courage, teaching that true strength comes from faith, not numbers. The Muslims returned to their camp, tending to the wounded and thanking Allah for His mercy. The battlefield grew quiet. The only sounds were wind and the distant cries of survivors. Muslims reflected on their small numbers, realizing victory comes only through Allah's support. Families in Medina rejoiced, as messengers brought news of the miraculous victory.
The day of Badr became a symbol of faith over fear, courage over arrogance.
The Quraysh retreated, their pride shattered, leaving behind a desert echoing with defeat.
Muslims collected the spoils of war, distributing them fairly among the fighters and needy. The young warriors who fought bravely were praised, their courage inspiring the entire Ummah. The battlefield of Badr became a lesson. Faith and trust in Allah triumph over might and arrogance. The Muslims rested, sharing water and food, grateful for Allah's protection throughout the battle. Night fell over Badr, the desert silent, except for prayers whispered under the starry sky. The survivors counted their blessings, realizing that Allah's mercy had guided them to victory.
News of Badr's triumph spread across the Arabian tribes, changing hearts and minds.
Badr proved that a small, faithful group could defeat a mighty army with Allah's help.
The Muslims inspected the battlefield, marking where key leaders of the Quraysh had fallen.
Abu Jahl's body lay among the fallen, a stark reminder of arrogance meeting its end.
The young Ansari boys were praised, their bravery immortalized in the hearts of the believers.
Badr became a symbol. Faith, courage, and reliance on Allah surpass worldly power. The Muslims returned to their tents, tending to the injured and thanking Allah for His guidance.
Families in Medina prayed with joy, hearing of the believers' miraculous victory at Badr. The Quraysh mourned their fallen, realizing that arrogance and pride led to their defeat.
The Prophet taught the companions that Allah's help is decisive, not mere swords or numbers.
The small band of believers had changed history, proving faith triumphs over fear and arrogance. Muslims repaired their weapons and camels, preparing for the journey back to Medina. The battlefield was calm, with only footprints, scattered armor, and the wind as witnesses.
The young heroes of Badr were honored by the companions for their courage and determination. The Prophet reminded the believers to remain humble and grateful for Allah's blessings. Badr's victory became a timeless lesson. Faith, patience, and reliance on Allah surpass all odds. Muslims gathered water and food for the journey, grateful for the provisions Allah had provided. Night fell over Badr, and the desert was quiet, save for whispered prayers under the stars. The companions reflected on their victory, knowing it was Allah's help, not numbers, that had won the day. Messengers carried the news to Medina, spreading joy and hope among the believers. Badr was remembered as Yawmul Furqan, the day of criterion, a turning point in Islamic history.
The Muslims packed their belongings, ready to return to Medina with victory in their hearts.
The desert was calm, the battle behind them, but the lessons of Badr etched forever in their hearts.
Muslims thanked Allah for guiding them, knowing their faith had overcome great odds.
The Quraysh mourned, realizing pride and arrogance could not defeat Allah's chosen.
Badr became a beacon of courage, teaching that true strength lies in faith and reliance on Allah.
The Muslims prepared to depart Badr, carrying memories of both struggle and divine support.
Water and food were shared among soldiers and animals, showing unity and care. The desert wind carried whispers of victory, reaching the hearts of believers in Medina.
Families prayed in gratitude, their faith strengthened by the miraculous triumph of Badr.
Badr was a defining moment. A small group, guided by faith, overcame a mighty army. The Muslims began their journey back to Medina, carrying both victory and lessons learned.
Victory was shared quietly among the companions, gratitude and humility in every heart. The Quraysh reflected on their loss, mourning leaders whose pride led them to ruin.
The Prophet ﷺ reminded the believers that true strength lies in faith, patience, and trust in Allah.
Badr became a timeless lesson. Small numbers, with Allah, can overcome the mighty. The Muslims carefully tended to their camels and horses, preparing for the journey home.
The battlefield grew silent, a testament to Allah's decisive help and the bravery of the believers. The young Ansari warriors were celebrated for their courage, inspiring all who witnessed Badr.
The Prophet ﷺ reminded everyone to remain humble, even in moments of triumph.
Faith, courage, and reliance on Allah had turned the tide, leaving history forever changed.
The Muslims organized their camp one last time, ensuring everyone and everything was ready for the journey.
The desert wind carried the whispers of victory, echoing across the dunes toward Medina.
Families in Medina rejoiced, their hearts filled with hope and gratitude for Allah's help.
The Quraysh mourned the fallen, realizing that pride and arrogance could not defeat Allah's chosen. Badr was remembered as a turning point, teaching that true victory comes from faith, not numbers. The Muslims checked their supplies, ensuring every camel and soldier was ready for the journey home. The companions reflected on the miracle of Badr, knowing Allah had guided their small band to victory.
Messengers rode swiftly to Medina, spreading the news of the believers' triumph.
The Quraysh mourned their losses, realizing arrogance and pride had brought them to defeat.
Badr became a symbol of faith's triumph, showing that with Allah, the few can overcome the many. The Muslims set out from Badr, walking through the desert with calm hearts and renewed faith.
They carried the lessons of battle, courage, reliance on Allah, and humility in victory.
Families in Medina eagerly awaited news, their prayers answered with the triumph at Badr. The Quraysh reflected on their defeat, mourning leaders whose pride had led them to ruin. Badr became a turning point in history, teaching that faith and trust in Allah surpass all odds. The Muslims paused to rest, offering prayers and gratitude for Allah's guidance at Badr.
They reflected on the lessons of courage and reliance on Allah, knowing it was His help that secured victory.
Messengers sped across dunes to Medina, bringing the miraculous news of Badr's triumph.
The Quraysh grieved their losses, understanding that pride and arrogance cannot overcome Allah's chosen.
Badr's victory became a symbol. Faith, courage, and reliance on Allah conquer even the mightiest foes. The Muslims walked through the desert, reflecting on the courage that had carried them to victory.
They shared stories of bravery and faith, teaching the next generation the lessons of Badr.
Families in Medina prayed and rejoiced, hearing that the believers had overcome the mighty Quraysh. The Quraysh mourned their leaders, learning that arrogance and pride can bring even the strong to ruin. Badr became a timeless lesson. True victory comes through faith, patience, and reliance on Allah. The Muslims rested briefly,
offering prayers of gratitude for the victory Allah had granted them. They shared water and food, demonstrating unity and care among the believers.
Whispers of Badr's triumph spread through the desert, reaching Medina and raising hope in hearts.
The Quraysh reflected on their loss, realizing arrogance and pride could not overcome Allah's chosen.
Badr became a beacon of courage, showing that faith and reliance on Allah surpass all worldly power. The Muslims continued their journey, the desert stretching endlessly before them, filled with lessons of Badr.
They shared stories of bravery and faith, ensuring the lessons of Badr would not be forgotten.
Families in Medina prayed and celebrated, knowing the believers had triumphed against overwhelming odds.
The Quraysh mourned, understanding that pride and arrogance lead even the mighty to defeat. Badr's legacy was clear. Faith, courage, and reliance on Allah can overcome any obstacle.
The Muslims paused to drink and rest, grateful for the sustenance Allah had provided during the battle.
They reflected on the courage and unity that had brought them victory, despite their small numbers.
Messengers sped toward Medina, carrying news that would bring joy and renewed faith to the believers.
The Quraysh grieved their fallen leaders, learning that arrogance and pride lead to ruin.
Badr remained a timeless lesson. Faith, patience, and reliance on Allah conquer even the strongest foes.
The Muslims walked through the desert, carrying both victory and the lessons Allah had taught them.
They spoke quietly of bravery and faith, ensuring the story of Badr would inspire future generations.
Families in Medina prayed and rejoiced, their hearts filled with hope and gratitude for Allah's help.
The Quraysh mourned their leaders, realizing that arrogance and pride could not defeat Allah's chosen.
Badr's legacy endured. Faith, courage, and reliance on Allah triumph over all obstacles.
The Muslims paused at a desert spring, drinking and thanking Allah for His blessings.
They reflected on the courage of Badr, knowing it was faith and unity that brought them victory.
Messengers rode quickly to Medina, carrying news that inspired joy and strengthened faith.
The Quraysh grieved their losses, realizing that pride and arrogance had led them to defeat.
Badr stood as a lasting lesson. Faith, patience, and trust in Allah overcome even the strongest enemies.
The Muslims carefully organized their camels and supplies, ready for the journey back to Medina.
They reflected on the bravery shown at Badr, knowing it was Allah's guidance that brought them victory.
Messengers raced toward Medina, spreading news of the miraculous triumph of the believers.
The Quraysh mourned their fallen leaders, realizing that pride and arrogance could not overcome Allah's chosen.
Badr became a timeless symbol. Faith, patience, and reliance on Allah can conquer even the mightiest foe.
The Muslims moved steadily through the desert, their hearts filled with gratitude and faith.
They recalled the bravery of the companions, understanding that faith had turned the tide of battle.
Families in Medina rejoiced as news of Badr's victory reached them. Hearts lift in prayer and celebration.
The Quraysh reflected on their defeat, realizing that arrogance and pride cannot stand against Allah's will.
Badr's legacy endured forever. Faith, courage, and reliance on Allah overcome all obstacles.